Lez Hang Out. And let's talk about what Lez is about. And let's listen to two lesbians shout. Lez Hang Out. Hey everyone, welcome back to Lez Hang Out, the podcast where I don't know what you thought I was going to do for this one, Ellie, but welcome to the internet. Have a look around. Anything that brain of yours can think of can be found.
What is that from?
A little Bo Burnham. And I interest you in everything all of the
I know,
time.
I was like, that it sounds like a YouTube meme, so yes.
I mean, I think the song kind of is, basically
yeah.
is. But yeah, it was tough to choose, you know?
Mm-hmm. So many options.
Lots of options.
Yes.
From the West Coast, I'm Lee Holmes Foster.
From the East Coast, I'm Ellie Brigida. To those who've been with us through this whole journey, thank you as always for listening. If you're a new listener, welcome. We're excited to have you here. Here's what's happening this week. This week in the Lesdom. This week in the Lesdom is a place where we can touch base each episode about things going on with the podcast or otherwise. In season 9, we are continuing to release our Patreon bonus episodes. You can listen to those at bit.ly/LesPatreon. We really appreciate our Patreon supporters. You help us continue to make this show, and it is our biggest financial contribution to this independent team. So thank you so much.
In the Greater Lez universe, starting with some exciting news up at the top, Beanie Feldstein just announced that she and her wife are expecting their first baby. Congrats. Love that for them.
Love it. We're so happy.
Exciting times.
In not so great news, Tina and Pari from Love on the Spectrum have broken up. They did say in their Instagram posts that they're going to remain friends, so I hope that is the case. But for any of you who live in Boston, Tina and Pari are like power lesbian couple in Boston. Pari loves the tea. Tina is amazing. They've come to a bunch of femme shows, so I also feel like personally connected to their breakup. Like, no. But I hope that they can remain friends, and we'll see how it goes.
Also in the Greater Lez universe, and I would just like to special shout out to circa 2009 Lee, who is out there somewhere watching Heroes in her clutchin' feels that Hayden Panettiere came out as bisexual, and like it's just truly, is there ever going to be a celebrity that is straight? No.
Doesn't
exist.
Also, how did Hayden Panettiere come out as bisexual? Like, what was the context?
She came out, I guess, as part of, she's releasing like a memoir.
Mm-hmm.
And as part of the promo for this upcoming memoir is putting it all out there. So it doesn't sound like it's news to her. I think it might just be
It's a public news. She said she had to wait till she was 36 to come out publicly. She's always been bi. She's been dating women from a very, very young age. And she just was concerned about publicity and like, I think for her, it's interesting because she said in this article, she was more concerned that people were going to be like upset she was jumping on the bisexual bandwagon. So I'm like, gays, get it together so that Hayden Panettiere can come out. But
yeah, truly, this one's on us.
This one's on us.
Okay, queers, let's take the L on this one.
It's a little bit of both, let's be real. But mostly us, no. But better late than never, you know?
So if you are, some queer woman who secretly dated Hayden Panettiere, hit us up.
Please let us know. We'd love to interview you.
Please let us know. Love that.
That's what's happening this week. Back to you, Ellie and Lee.
Thanks, Ellie and Lee. And we are so excited to bring you episode 19 of season 9. It's I Censor-Ship It. And we have a very special guest joining us today. We have Yi-Ling Liu, whose work has been published in New York Times Magazine, New Yorker, Harper's Magazine, Wired, and the New York Review of Books, and who has a new book, The Wall Dancers, that just came out in February. Is that correct?
That's right.
In February. Well, hey, Yi-Ling, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
We're very excited to have you. Can you tell our listeners a little bit more about your book, The Wall Dancers, before we dive into our chat today?
Yeah, of course. I will start off by saying I recognize that song, but I wasn't sure where it came from. But I was like, Bo Burnham. That makes sense.
It's somewhere in our brains.
It's a brain worm. It's a brain worm.
Yes.
It's not in The Wall Dancers, though, because unfortunately it's not about the internet that Bo Burnham is talking about, but it's about the Chinese internet. And it's a work of narrative nonfiction. I follow the lives of 5 individuals over the course of the last 30 years in China and the various ways they're trying to push for all kinds of different social change, but from within the bounds of China's Great Firewall, which is its kind of like vast and complex censorship system.
What prompted the desire for the book? Like, what was the journey to getting there?
Yeah, I mean, it was a very long journey. I would say like the seeds of it were probably laid when I was 15. So when I was a teenager, and I grew up in Hong Kong, which was in many ways a kind of like the fault lines between China and the rest of the world. We had a kind of open internet and a open society in the way that the mainland did not. But I had worked in Beijing that summer as an intern at a state publication. And I, for the first time, had written this like very not important article, as interns do, about like a literary magazine in Hong Kong that wanted to discuss the Tiananmen protests. And my editor was like, you have to take this out. And, I wasn't naive. I knew that things had to be taken out, that things were censored, but that was kind of my first brush with the like censor's hand. And it really kind of set forth, I would say, more than decade long investigation into the question of just like, what does it mean to write and live creatively and with integrity within the bounds of the firewall. And then fast forward to after graduating from college, I went to college in the US. I was like, I kind of want to go back, and I kind of want to go back to Beijing and really do this story justice. And that's during this period is kind of when the kind of book idea first came to fruition.
Yeah, I feel like it's so interesting to talk about this concept also in the terms of the queer community, because like if, they're censoring you in certain ways, like I do feel like there's like a different kind of level of queer censorship in the US that's like not even close to the level that would be in China. But I'm curious like what parallels you've seen with like US queer censorship versus Chinese queer censorship.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll have to think about it, because like I think with both the US and China, at least definitely in China, we've seen like huge changes, like dramatic changes over the course of the last 30 years, which I cover in terms of like how queer content is censored online, right? So like the beginning of the book that I write about, we're talking about like the late 90s when people were first logging onto the web.
Internet cafes, what an era.
Exactly. Like, and during this period, like being gay was still a crime in China. Like it was still classified as a mental illness. At the same time, like the internet just wasn't as rigidly censored. So you could find all kinds of things online. Like the only things that were really taken down were what were called the 3Ts, like Tibet, Tiananmen, Taiwan. But, as like one of the subjects in my book, he's just able to go to an internet cafe and find this like entire kind of like gay novella online about this like tumultuous affair between two men. And it's like it's like not censored at all. It's like a very steamy kind of online novel. But at the time, it's still like quite repressed, right? In terms of like how people were living and how out people were. Now, fast forward to today in China, like arguably so much more content is much more rigidly censored. Like it's very hard to even find the word like gay appear on a social media platform. But this same person that I profile, has started his own family. He is living with his partner. He has a son.
Yeah.
Like he's very open and out. So it's this like weird, on one hand, kind of like a more repressive environment, and one hand, kind of more open. And I'd say like something similar has happened in the US as well, right? In terms of just like culturally, how at least like, my friends and, for example, my sister's generation, my sister is like 10 years younger than me, and she's now going to college in the US. Like the kind of conversation around queerness and being queer on her college campus is just like completely different from what it was when I was in college, right? Just like the level of openness, the level of kind of like there, like being like coming out is not even like a discussion anymore for many people in their generation. That being said, like you're seeing this like huge backlash and so much kind of like hate against queer communities, and like all these conversations about banned books in school libraries, right? And so there's a lot of fear. I mean, I haven't been following the kind of nuts and bolts of what is taking place in the US, but I have witnessed what seems like just general climate of fear around hateful voices being amplified and new rules and regulations that we wouldn't have even dreamed of kind of being discussed, being kind of debated openly.
I do want to talk a little bit about the story with Ma finding that gay romance, steamy, hot romance that he found, and just like that experience of maybe this is just me, but I feel like for probably queers of a certain age, you know, that experience of being like on a computer in a more public setting, you know, I mean, like, granted, I wasn't late 90s, like mid-late 90s quite at that point. And mine was more like, oh, the family computer lives in the kitchen, you know. But I think like everyone remembers that era of what, who's over my shoulder, what side am I looking at? Is this am I gay quiz? Like what, quick hide, minimize the window, you know. But also there was something about like him just sobbing in an internet cafe, having found this story depicting something that like he'd never seen, like possibly never let himself imagine to that level. And it's like I just think about even now, like the amount that queer people still, the fan fiction communities, like the rise of like queer romance novels and like, you know, just published books of things that like the change in my lifetime has been wild. And I think that like there is such a queer history of finding those spaces online and like starting to engage with that type of like content and community and things online. And it's just so, I don't know, I was like reading that section and I was just like, ugh.
You're like,
boy,
this is
hits,
me. Yeah.
that hits home, doesn't it? You know, it's like instead of the steamy Chinese men getting it on, you're like, okay, and what was my early fan fiction ship? Same thing, same story, same experience.
Yeah, you were reading some Xena and Gabrielle fanfic.
Probably.
We know.
Probably. Let's be real. Yeah, there's not enough Xena and Gabrielle experience in here. But it does, like, I think it's that there's something that's so, regardless of where you are and where the censorship is coming from and it's just like there's those experiences that I think tie together so much of how queer people use internet, use queer spaces that we sort of find for ourselves. And it was something that I felt like kept coming up in the book, you know, of like using these spaces, even as they're being monitored, even as they're being, you know, like even as the censorship is starting to crack down and all this stuff of like, we're going to find new language, we're going to find new stuff. Like I feel like it's such a common story of marginalized communities in general, you know?
Totally. Yeah, there's such a like, what I did find just doing my reporting was that there's such a common thread between people's experiences down to like keywords that people searched. Like so many gay men specifically would tell me they would search things like, instead of searching 同志, which is gay in Chinese or means comrade, they would search things like boy, you know? And I just get this like tentative, like they don't want to go as far to write down, like to write the word gay. So they just write like boy and see what comes up. And like that was something that would come up all the time. And then like Beijing Story was obviously like this huge, like that novel specifically was something that like every single queer person of that generation, I would say even this generation, is familiar with in China. Yeah. So like there are certain cultural artifacts, I'm not sure what the equivalent is in the US, that just have a really strong hold and kind of unify the experience.
Can you, real quick, just because you mentioned it, can you also talk a little bit about, I'm going to do my best with caveat for Ellie and I this whole episode, trying our best on pronunciation, but Tongzhu, but there's also, you said there was in the book, there's something where they like switched that to a slightly different like
yeah.
or something.
Yeah. So no, this is actually really interesting. So like the kind of official word for homosexual, right? I mean, you know, even like homosexual, that's like literally the equivalent, I would say, is 同性恋, which literally is like kind of like attraction to the same sex. Like that is what it is. And the queer community in China at the time, I think this is maybe like during the late 90s, kind of wanted to repurpose that word because it has such a clinical overtone. Like it had this like weird official clinical overtone. And so they came up with the word 同志 to kind of refer to being queer. And 同志literally means comrade. So, you know, that phrase was like thrown around basically for the entirety of like the 40s and 50s because China was like a communist country. And that repurposing I find fascinating because, you know, the kind of American queer community have taken the word queer, right? As I don't know what the like etymology or the origins of queer is, but there's a sense of like kind of acknowledging one's difference, right? One's strangeness and kind of like bringing meaning to that identity through difference. Whereas in the Chinese context, what's interesting is like they wanted to bring meaning to this identity through a sense of like sameness, right? Through a sense of like, we are just like you, like we are part of this like collective.
Which I thought was so great. It's like, because I think there's a lot of queer history of like reclaiming the slurs against us, you know, in a general sense. I mean, like queer, obviously, dyke, you know, like just all these words that were like, yeah, okay, fine, like that's ours now.
Yeah, like if you're gonna call us that, we will also use it. Well, I feel like it's interesting. It's like I feel like comrade is giving like Friends of Dorothy kind of like, and that's what I do find interesting. And maybe you could talk a little bit more about it. It's like as like censorship becomes very like word based, like you said, it's like if like somebody's searching the internet and it's like, I'm going to cut all of the things that say gay, right? What are like the ways in which the gay community in China has sort of like been like, we're going to get around this because we're going to say comrade, or we're going to say something that we know.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, I'm like winking at you. You know what I'm talking about. But like the censors have no clue what we're talking about, but like we know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
How does that happen? Because I find that fascinating.
There are so many, and I'll just give like a recent example, which I find fascinating. So Douyin is China's TikTok. It's like the same platform, same app. There are kind of like queer influencers, though they don't necessarily like describe themselves as such. And they're essentially like gay couples or lesbian couples who live stream their lives, just like day-to-day lives, like making my bed, like getting breakfast, like going about our days. And it's just kind of like a way to make queer life visible on like a mass social media platform. But at a certain point, a few years ago, like the word gay or lesbian or queer, you know, just started getting scrubbed off the platform. And so they would start using terms like brothers or sisters. Like that was something that would come up a lot. And then you would just be like a pair of brothers, like living there. And they're like obviously not brothers, you know, like you're watching these two guys live their life and they're not brothers. Like they're affectionate and loving and clearly partners. But like those feeds would become super popular because there's just no clear way to take them off the web. And, you know, like I think that also is something that like is a term that people will use offline as well. Just like I remember talking to one friend and she is lesbian and she has a female partner and she would bring her female partner home with her for like Chinese New Year. And she would shoot like everyone in her family would know that like this was her girlfriend. But they didn't want the like elderly, you know, like the grandparents and stuff to freak out. And they just like didn't want it out in the open. They didn't want it to be spoken. So they just like continually referred to her girlfriend as like her cousin. And so like everyone was in on this, you know, like I'm like very torn about this kind of like complicity, but it worked for them. And they, you know, they made it work. They made it possible for her girlfriend to be like integrated into this like hyper conservative family because they referred to her as her cousin.
Yeah, I feel like that's also like not so far away from a lot of US culture as well. You know, it's like I feel like my aunt is gay, so I grew up with knowing she was gay, but like never really I don't know if I can remember like the point in time at which I knew that her girlfriend was her girlfriend. But I do feel like there's a culture of like, oh yeah, like Auntie Meg's roommate, best friend, you know, like I think that especially in different versions of culture or like, I agree it's a strange one because I feel like it made me feel still like being gay was something that was wrong, but they weren't like shunning my aunt. So I feel like it was like, oh, well, she's still part of the family and her roommate's still at all of our holidays. So like everything's fine, but it gives this like it is, I think, it's a very complex feeling, right? Where it's not so black and white of like, we are sort of accepting. So it's like, okay, you're grateful for that kind of. It's definitely complicated. So I understand like the complex feelings of that.
But there's also something so funny to me about like, and I don't know, maybe it is just sort of a unavoidable thing that comes up all the time, but I do always find it great when the things that we reclaim are like I guess what I'm thinking of is, you know, like we make fun of a lot, I think, the historian approach to obvious gayness, you know, of like this painting depicting two women lying in a bed together, you know, like this arrangement might have been because of their close familial bond or there's something. You're like, my guy, you know, like they're not sisters, but it's like that obvious go-to of like rewriting that we see all the time. And there's just something that's very funny to me about being like, well, you can't censor brothers. Can't take brothers off the internet, so like, haha, we've caught you in your own trap. Like, I just think that's great, even though I totally see the erasure part, the sort of inherent, like, if everyone knows it's an open secret, the shame that it bakes into that secret. But still, it also kind of makes me laugh a little bit to use that.
Well, I also feel like
it's like the Uno reverse of it, you know?
In a culture of censorship, also, it's like, this is what you have to do. So, like, either they don't show themselves at all, which is not helpful, or, like, figure out a creative way to share their lives.
Yeah.
Especially with the online stuff.
Yeah.
Just very interesting.
There's also another form, I would say, which is, I would say it's, like, maybe more censored now, but for a long time, there was just, like, these stories of, like, specifically gay men. And interestingly, its audience would be mostly women, both queer and straight women, of just like romances that would never resolve, like would never consummate. So you just like, they're like two people are just like edging themselves like for the entire web series. And it's like the kind of genre is called danmei in Chinese. And you just have like two high school boys, like it's like heated rivalry, but it never like no sex
but they
happens.
never go there.
Exactly.
That's so funny.
And people love it. It's like a $1 billion industry. Like I think it's like more rigidly censored now, but for a long time, like that was another way to kind of like get these narratives through, just like continual romance.
Why does that feel sort of like the gay equivalent of like Mormons soaking, you know? It's like,
yes.
We're not actually doing it. We're not doing it.
It's just so funny.
Can't say we did it.
I feel like queer women we've talked about this so many times. Queer women love yearning. So to be like, this entire content is just yearning and like none of the gay men are watching it, like makes complete sense.
Yeah.
Like that's actually comedy. But yes, I love that people are reclaiming things too. And I feel like another big part of the book is like talking about, like you're talking about how like in real life, right? Like people have their partners and their families now, but like the importance of meeting people online for queer people, I feel like we also understand in the US, but like I feel like it's very like in a situation of censorship where and why those communities are coming together. Would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's huge. Like the internet was just absolutely transformative if you were a queer person growing up today, but like especially in the 90s and the early 2000s. I think it was probably huge for someone growing up in the US. It was literally like you just didn't even like, there's one woman that I spoke to who grew up in the 80s and 90s was just like, I literally thought that I was like the only lesbian in the world. You know, like there's just like no way you even are aware of the existence of like other queer people without an online platform. And I think, you know, it's slightly easier if you live in a big city. So like Beijing, Shanghai, Changsha, Shenzhen, you know, there were kind of like gay bars popping up in the late 90s, early 2000s. But if you're from a small, like, third tier city or rural town in Shanxi province, like, literally the only way in which you know that other queer people exist is through these gay websites that were coming up, you know, in the late 90s, and later these like dating apps that were popping up in the 2000s. And so I think it's huge. Like, the internet is just like was absolutely crucial in a way that I don't think it was as kind of pivotal elsewhere, you know, like where like physical spaces of gathering were so much more accessible.
Yeah. What was your experience of like early baby gay on the internet, like for you personally? What was the
Yeah, I guess like my experience is very different from the experience of people that I write about, because I grew up in Hong Kong. Like, I didn't grow up in China. And so like I grew up in essentially an open internet, which is very similar to, you know, like what I'd say like a millennial, like a late stage millennial growing up in New York City was like. And for me, it was less kind of like media consumption and internet and more just being like, why do I have feelings for this woman? You know, like, why do I have feelings for this girl? And like the vocabulary was already there. You know, like we had watched things like Gossip Girl, or, you know, I'm trying to think of like the American media at the time that was pivotal. I think, you know, it wasn't even like queer media per se. It was just like watching things like, I don't know, like Sherlock Holmes and thinking that like Rachel McAdams was hot. You know what I mean? Like there wasn't really like pivotal kind of like pieces of media. I would say like I'm really not a good example of someone who is like hyper online. You know, like Alison Bechdel's Fun Home was like, you know, like a core text, but I'm like a reader. So I think as much as my experience is interesting, it's like it diverges very much from the people that I write about. And I think we could relate in many ways, but in many ways, like a lot of the experiences I was writing about felt almost like foreign to me, and I had to like really learn. I didn't ever go to an internet cafe, you know, like I didn't stumble upon some online novel. Like, it was very much in the ether that I'd grown up with.
Did you ever do internet cafes, Ellie?
I feel like
you might
not
be like
old.
just
behind
I feel like
me. I'm like not old enough for that, I don't think.
Yeah, no, because it's like I feel like I caught the very tail end. Like my uncle owned one out in Block Island when I was a kid. He like ran an internet cafe, and I feel like that was like such a specific era of time. Like when I came into it, you know, I felt like I was like right at the sort of tail end of like now everyone just has the internet in their houses.
Yeah, like I feel like I just remember sometime when I was in school when we started using the internet. So like I feel like I was like a kid/teenager.
Yeah, you weren't going and you know, popping quarters in somewhere to to stay connected.
No, but
it was an era, but that's what I thought was so interesting is, I mean, obviously when you read the book, there's so much difference, right? Both in terms of the time. I mean, I think especially starting with the you know, in the late 90s where like even I was kind of too young and the internets were very different. But it was interesting like how much still felt connected, you know? Like just still resonated in terms of like those experiences of finding your people, finding your places, finding these stories. And I think it really highlights how important representation is. You know, it's like we talk about this all the time on the podcast of like, why does it matter so much? But I think that that's what you see in like Ma's story and things is like how much of a difference that makes. Like the difference that you have of real like exactly what you said of like, oh, I'm not, it's not just me. There's more people out there. And like that is, I think we talk a lot about just a huge shift in like now with media, with the internet, with like this ability for people to see themselves represented. And I think like it is something that's easy to lose sight of. I think people now like I mean, there is a lot more of a crackdown happening in the US, which obviously is not quite at the same level yet of, like the Great Firewall and things like that, but of, as we see these things coming in with like identity verification that people like, that people are pushing for in a bunch of states, and you're just like, oh, oh no. Like I know you talk in the book about, like when the change when they started requiring like real names to be used more, and like if you can talk a little bit about just like what effect that had on obviously like the queer spaces, but just in a general sense, like just people's ability to have free speech, right? And like things like that.
Yeah. No, I would say like definitely the real name verification thing was a big deal. But it was like one of many things, like one of many steps that the party state had taken to kind of like squeeze and clamp down on the internet. I don't think that necessarily had huge implications for like the queer community and queer content. I think it was mostly around kind of like political content and political dissent. And this was probably like in 2017 real name verification. And so 2016, 2017, I would say like the climate around like what you could put online that was like queer was like much better than it is today. I think the big thing that kind of really made things difficult was just like explicit rules that were set by the party, and it would just be like these like big statements, kind of like censorship directives, a little bit like, I don't know if you've read Harry Potter, but like when Dolores Umbridge kind of like puts these like things on the wall, and she's just like, and like, thou shall not say this,
Yeah.
and like those were big for like queer content, where I remember, I think I write about this in the book, in 2017 they put out this like big censorship directive with like 68 things that they wanted to scrub off, and one of them was just like anything same sex. And it's not like then the government goes and like cracks down on all of that. It's more like they rely on social media companies like, like a good Slytherin or like a Draco Malfoy to like read that directive and just be like, oh, holy shit, like I need to be a good student and like proactively go into my feeds and like scrub that information off. I would say that those were probably the biggest kind of measures that created like a chilling effect on
I think in the US right now, in terms of like what feels like it's sort of staring us in the face, is like it's similar that you have this list of like restricted topics, right? And the goal is to say, hey, if we can't verify your identity, to verify your age, like all of these things are restricted. And on that list are all queer things, right? So it's like anything that in any way is going to get categorized as queer content, that is now age restricted, and you have to like upload your ID, verify who you are to get access to it. And of course, the danger is like, it takes away access to a lot of just the content and communities, but it also takes away access to like help, like information sites, just like public health organizations putting out information on coming out, on safe sex practices, on just, just basic, critical, important information that like queer youth like can need access to even, it's just, it puts like everything in a box and then like locks the box on you, and I think it is a lot more prominent in that's sort of like the big thing in the US space in terms of like what we're looking at and wondering what the ramifications of that could and or will be, like if some of these things pass and go into effect. And then also just what that, I think for a lot of US people, we're not always so good at thinking about the fact that there's like overlords. They're still there. We still have them, even if they're not sort of, cracking down at the same level. But it's like they're always Big Brother's watching. And then, now you start looking at the Big Brother's watching, and now he's going to start taking things away. And you're like, oh, interesting. So I thought it was neat is not the right word, but like that, getting to read some of just the like narrative experiences of people living in situations where like now that is the case. Like there's all these, you're reading about, I'm forgetting the name. Was that Eric, or who's the one who was doing the censorship? Like
Eric Liu.
Gathering the directives and and all this stuff. And so you're like reading this experience of like the groups of people and, like, oh, we're expanding the team to like go in and remove all these things from the internet and stuff. And you're like, oh.
Starting or growing your own business can be intimidating and lonely at times. Your to-do list may feel endless with new tasks, and lists can easily begin to overrun your life. So finding the right tool that not only helps you out, but simplifies everything as a built-in business partner can be a game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US. From household names like Gymshark, Rare Beauty, and Heinz, to brands just getting started. Shopify has hundreds of ready-to-use templates that can help you build a beautiful online store that matches your brand's style. And you can tackle all the important tasks in one place, from inventory to payments to analytics and more. No need to save multiple websites or try to figure out what platform is hosting the tool that you need. And if people haven't heard about your brand, you can get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you, with easy-to-run email and social media campaigns to reach customers wherever they're scrolling or strolling. Start your business today with the industry's best business partner, Shopify, and start hearing. Sign up for your $1 per month trial today at shopify.com/realm. Go to shopify.com/realm. That's shopify.com/realm.
Hi, listeners. We want to tell you about a podcast we love. It's called Rebel Girls, formerly known as Goodnight Stories for Rebel Girls. It's about real-life women who are changing the world with their courage, creativity, and big, bold ideas. Want to know how Taylor Swift became a superstar? Or hear how Simone Biles became the greatest athlete of all time? From immersive stories to heartfelt interviews to super smart advice, Rebel Girls brings you stories that will get you fired up to become your best self. There are over 400 episodes for you to explore, with new episodes every week. So check it out. Listen to Rebel Girls wherever you get your podcasts. And find us on youtube.com/rebelgirls. And whatever you do, stay rebel.
Reality TV is messy.
Pop culture is louder than ever.
And the internet
completely unhinged.
Welcome to Roxanne
and Chantel,
the podcast where cousins Roxanne and Chantel break down reality TV, celebrity drama, and the stories everyone's texting about.
We recap the shows,
spill the headlines,
and sit down with the stars themselves.
No filter,
no boring takes,
just the tea.
New episodes every week.
If it's trending,
we're talking about it.
This is Roxanne
and Chantel.
Let's get into it.
Are you tired of hearing people with horrible summer house takes go on long rants about stuff they barely have any clue about? Oh, you're not? Great! Well, then why not listen to Turtle Time? That's right, my name is Riley Hamilton.
And I'm Amy Scarlotta.
And we host the podcast Turtle Time, which is fully dedicated to discussing every aspect of the current summer house news, and we will hopefully leave you thinking as well as laughing. Isn't that right, Amy?
That's right. Our summer house coverage is available on Wednesday, and you can listen to it on any podcast platform that you love.
Let's dive back in. Ellie had to hop off, so it's going to be just you and me, Yi-Ling, for the rest of the episode. And here's what I was hoping to talk about. While we're talking about some of these stories of the experience of the people who were like working in this system, and I was thinking also about Stanley.
Yeah, that's right.
That correct?
That's right.
Who sort of was, caught in this impact of like US market decisions, Google decisions, and all this stuff. Because one thing that I think is interesting is, we can talk a lot about the experience of marginalized communities and how we can sort of like find ways around and work our way through the systems and all this stuff. But I feel like those stories to me also kind of highlighted again this thing that I don't think we always think about, which is like you're sort of still existing in this space where you're like at the mercy of. And the ways in which I'm curious what your thought was while writing the book about that sort of balance, you know, of like the empowerment of being able to work against and like despite and within these systems, but ultimately kind of still being a little stuck in like a world that we don't run and control.
I mean, it's terrifying. To put very simply, it's like really scary. And I think, you know, so much of the book is about how this takes place in the Chinese internet, right? This sense that like the state is increasingly amassing all this power, and there's like really a lot there's very little wiggle room that you can have as all of this power is concentrated, not just, you know, by political power, but also kind of the tech elite. I think I was like surprised at the extent to which the US internet has started to look like that as well. And I think the key difference is just that there are kind of two competing nodes of power. And sometimes they work together and sometimes they are at odds. Whereas, you know, with the Chinese government and tech companies, it's a lot more in sync. But, you know, like in the US, you have essentially Silicon Valley and the current administration kind of forging this like strange relationship of patronage and dependency. And like, you know, I don't have really like clear answers like how to take down the system other than to like first start even being aware of it.
No, we'd like a manual.
I mean, it's like just even like being aware of it, right? For like the longest time, just to take like TikTok as an example, right? For the longest time, the kind of conversation around TikTok in the US was like the Chinese government able to influence ByteDance, and ByteDance owns TikTok, and therefore like ByteDance is going to control the feeds that show up on American users' phones. Now TikTok has been sold. Its ownership is primarily Oracle and a bunch of American investors, but it, you know, like the fear hasn't gone away, because now the question is, okay, well, to what extent does Oracle have control over what shows up on TikTok users' feeds, and like to what extent does Oracle's relationship with the current administration shape that, right? So you're just essentially, it's, you know, you can't draw like a direct parallel. These two countries are so different, but essentially like the systems of algorithmic control are very much in place. And it's like it can sometimes feel like debilitating to be caught within these like bigger forces. And the same goes with like gay dating apps, or like, you know, like Grindr, for example. I don't know if you saw this in the book, was acquired by a Chinese social media company, Kunlun. And as a result of that, the US government freaked out because they were worried that, you know, like somehow Kunlun would have access to like the data of closeted American politicians, you know? And like,
yeah,
that would just affect in many ways Grindr's future. Exactly. Like that was
hot. Do it.
Exactly.
Go nuts, China.
I found that particularly just like hilarious. And, you know, like it wasn't, you know, if a Chinese social media company had bought like a dating app, like a non-gay dating app, right? Like a straight dating app, it's like they wouldn't have blinked an eye. So it's like kind of weird that they singled out Grindr specifically. But all this is, you know, all this to say, it's like there are all these forces taking place, and it's like very hard to like carve out your little space of freedom.
Listen, you know, like for the FBI agent whose job is to listen in on this episode, like I'm not saying what anyone should or shouldn't do in real life. I'm just saying someone should like write a book, write a fiction novel about, you know, like an enemy government targeting and buying like our gay dating apps to like expose all of our secret gay evangelical conservative leaders. Like, just write me that book, someone. If you're listening to this and you like writing books, just an idea, free idea for you, you know?
Maybe that'll be my next book.
You shift so hard off the like nonfiction historical narrative to like just a very fictionalized story. Yes, that's what we're promoting here.
I just don't want my fate to be like Gawker, you know.
Yeah. Sorry, I got so deep into that train of thought that I'm like, where was I going originally, and why was it not someone being like, here's Lindsey Graham's dating history?
You need a separate podcast for that. Can't help you with that.
Yeah,
Sorry.
right? Yeah. No, I know what it was. I was interested in, because the other thing that I thought was interesting for me, because again, like this was so much of a reality and space that, like, realistically I know very little about, right? And I'm curious because I know you talk about, in terms of your experience growing up and sort of being able to step foot in both, where you're like, you'd go to China and see posts about events there and then sort of leave and see kind of a wildly different internet experience of like that same topic, event, things. And I'm curious because I do think the US especially, I think, to me, always has a tendency to forget the rest of the world sometimes, or like there's a very specific US way of thinking about the rest of the world. And I'm curious what your take is on experiencing from like the outside the US.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, how do you think, what are the things where you see that you're like, oh, interesting how Americans think or feel that way? Like, everyone in the rest of the world knows that, I'm curious, like, what that looks like from the outside perspective.
Is this like observing US or the kind of weird ways in which the US observes what goes on in China?
Either
okay,
or
I'll
both.
start with the second because I think that's clear to be. But
Okay.
like, the US tends to think of China in like binaries. And this is like everything, but particularly with just like how queer communities function in China, it's like the narrative for the large part is like, I've definitely heard versions of this, like gay people don't exist, or like they can't speak out. They're basically completely repressed. Like no one comes out. No one has any, like there are no queer communities essentially. Like this is like a frequent narrative that I hear in the US, like total repression. And then you have like, I think recently Hassan Piker went and visited China. And what was fascinating was like, there's been this like strange kind of wave of China envy kind of moving through the US right now, like this China maxing phenomena. And he like did an interview with CGTN, which was like Chinese state media. He was like waving around Mao's like little red book of quotations. And he was like, China's actually hella gay. Like as if like, and this is like kind of like when the American left kind of like merges with tanky culture and kind of like almost like kowtows to China because they're like so upset with what's going on back home and kind of like American imperialism. But then it ends up being like, oh, actually, like China is this queer utopia, like China is so, and it's just like, no, like both of those are not true.
And let me tell you what, if someone's going to do that, it's going to be Hassan Piker.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's what you're going to get. Yeah, it is interesting because it's like, I mean, I feel like the US, it probably is baked into this idea that I think is very ubiquitous here, where like Americans have this tendency to think of the whole rest of the world as like these backwater, like, just we have democracy and we have freedom and everywhere else is terrible and awful. And so it is interesting where you combine that with this current weird narrative that's like getting pushed weirdly from the right, of also like, and we can't say anything anymore because of woke, and so and then it becomes this weird thing where it uses all of those things that you're saying, of people have this idea of like China's this completely repressive society where you can't even be gay and nobody is and all this stuff. And at the same time, now we're going to push this narrative of like, actually it's hella gay out here. And it's like the underlying thing there is kind of trying to be like, even this place that we have created and crafted this whole narrative around the censorship and the repression, and they don't have all of our ideals and our freedoms, but even they can be gay here. It's like, it's this weird, very both sides-ism of it that tries to like leverage its own sort of, I mean, like racist, sure, but like that sense of nationalism, and it like builds on all of these awful things where it's like, it feels like it's saying positive things about China, but in a way, like they're kind of doing it in a way where it doesn't.
I think
they're
just kind of
it's
like projecting, like there's a tendency among Americans to kind of like project their fears and dreams and envies and desires onto China as this like two-dimensional mirror. It doesn't, like, no one's actually like seeing what's taking place in the country. It's just like, we have these fears. Tucker Carlson is like worried about America turning woke. He'll be like, China has a word for woke, and it's called Baizuo, which means the white left, like, so like, there seems to be just like huge projection on the part of the US onto China. I can also speak to like the strange things that I observe the other direction,
please.
As an outsider looking into the US, a couple things come to mind. Like a lot less obvious than just like maybe like a cultural difference, but like coming out narratives in the US tend to be like very kind of dramatic. Like there's like a pull of a veil, and it's like one day and it's sudden. I don't know, like correct me if I'm wrong, but like especially in Hollywood, right? Like there's a kind of performance that comes with it. And I think among a lot of the like Chinese people that I speak with, they're kind of, that's just not what coming out looks like to us. Like it's this like long drawn out process, and there's no like one day where you're like, Mom, I'm gay. It's like you're like slowly putting like queer, media on your, parents' bedside table, like, and then you're like introducing them to your gay friend, and, and it can take years, if not decades, if ever. Right. So there's less of this kind of like, and maybe it's just like the constraints that are, on like Chinese queer people, but like there's less of this like one dramatic kind of Hollywood moment. That's one thing that I've observed, which, is something that I think people in China kind of notice is like a difference when they look at what happens in the US. And then I guess that's one of them.
It is interesting because it's like, I feel like when you talk to queer people, there's like, I think Ellie and I have said on the show before that we're like, coming out feels like it never ends, but at the same time, there is this narrative, I think, that's built around that, and then you flip a switch and you tell everyone. and it's more that like, you just do that all the time. It's like, once you tell people, then it's like, well, you'll have to keep telling people, but it is interesting that there's like a different sense of, it's like, here we have like coming out day, and like you have a whole holiday's not the right word, but like just like a whole day devoted to the idea of just like, that one, like, bust the door down and I'm here now. It's interesting that doesn't happen everywhere. Can't believe everyone doesn't have like a big, confetti cannon your way out a door and just explode on the world in glitter and rainbows.
No, definitely. That's something that comes up a lot when
Was it weird for you, because you said you went to school in the US, of like when you got here, was there a noticeable difference too compared to like, what you felt like you'd experienced in Hong Kong or in were you in London before coming here, or was that after?
Yeah, I would say like less of a jarring experience like between China and the US, just because I went to international school, and so like the cultures were quite similar. I would say like college was definitely more queer. Like just everything felt way more queer. Like everything, like just like the number of queer people that I met and friends who were queer and communities that were queer, and that could just be a byproduct of like growing older, and being a college student.
Where did you go to school?
So it's like I
Okay.
remember at the time the phrase was like 1 in 4, maybe more. That's what, so like that was the environment that I went to college in. And that was definitely not the case in high school, but that's like not the case of any high school, so
Yeah.
yeah.
I think it's so funny, like all of the number of different in the US, like things like that, like the little, oh, here's what our campus used to have as like the sayings, and here was our term for this. It's like, I feel like the more you, like, there's just always more of them, and I always find them so great. I love that. 1 in 4, maybe more. Please tell me they made like shirts of that.
But they have not, but maybe they should now, though. It'd probably be like 1 and 2,
Someone
maybe
get
more,
on that.
Okay,
listen up, listeners. If you're in the Yale area and you want to make some fun shirts, hit us up. I want one. Especially because I love stuff like that you have to like explain to straight people, When you have to be like, what does this mean? Well, sit down, buddy. Buckle up. We've got some education to do. Any last thoughts, Yi-Ling, you want to share with our listeners about the book? Anything you were hoping to talk about that we didn't touch on?
Well, one thing that I'll mention that I wanted to include in the book but never made it was that the last scene I really wanted to include because I'd done a lot of reporting and had actually done like an entire Vice news video segment on the underground ballroom scene in China.
No.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Please give us the cutting
I really
room
want to
floor.
plug that. It's still up on YouTube. It's on Vice, but like it was incredible. Like that experience. And my book is called The Wall Dancers. They're literally dancing. So I thought it was going to be this like beautiful poetic way to end the book. It didn't quite fit, but it like over the last 5 years, a really incredible like voguing scene has just like popped up in Chinese cities. So like Shanghai is big, Beijing is pretty big, Chengdu, which is literally called Gaydu because it's kind of like considered the queer capital of China, like have these incredible voguing scenes. And I was just struck by, like even in this particular climate, how the scene has continued to grow and people continue to find each other. And like, these are not online spaces, right? These are like physical spaces of gathering. And that is what I find really beautiful, even as the climate changes. Like in 2021, I went to Shanghai, and back then it was still really easy. Like they hosted this huge underground ballroom, like underground ball in like the middle of Shanghai, right by the Bund and this art museum. It was like sponsored by like Absolute Vodka or whatever, Fast forward 2 years later, the political climate has changed quite rapidly. The one that I went to in Beijing, the underground ball, was like out in the suburbs, like in a like really kind of rundown industrial warehouse. They couldn't even advertise it because they didn't want like the cops to come shut it down. But still, people showed up. There's still a ton of people. The community is still growing. And so, that was like one of the most wonderful communities that I'd been able to kind of witness and be a part of and write about when I was in China. And they didn't make it into the book, but it's something that I think people should pay attention to. Exactly.
Next book. It can be in the Grinder book.
Yeah.
We'll include it in there. That's awesome. Well, are you ready to dive in to our Q and Gay section?
Q and Gay.
Starting with question 1, Yi-Ling. What app do you use more out of A, Weibo, B, WeChat, C, TikTok, or D, Instagram?
Oh, Instagram.
That's okay. We're going to post them on Instagram, so there will be a bias, obviously, in the answers. That's fine. Okay, question 2. Pick a censorshipable T-word out of A, Tiananmen, B, transgender, C, tantric sex, or D, Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift.
She's controversial, Gotta crack down on that. Okay, question 3. What was your early queer internet interaction? A, fanfiction, B, chat rooms, C, message boards, or D, dating apps?
Oh, wait, what was the first one?
Fanfiction.
Wow, none of them.
You can write in an answer. You're the guest.
Like YouTube.
YouTube.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, see, I didn't go there because YouTube wasn't there.
I aged myself.
YouTube wasn't there as when I started on the internet, and that's okay, kids. Question 4. What did your coming out journey feel like? One sudden flip a switch moment or a drawn out journey of change?
Drawn out.
It never stops. And question 5. Now, I will say for you, you might have to thought experiment. Imagine you're in the US. What is your personal FBI agent watching you for? A, gay stuff, B, political commentary, or C, both?
C, both.
As it should be. Remember, listeners, you can give us your own answers to this episode's Q&A questions on our Instagram at Lez Hang Out Pod. Yi-Ling, thanks so much for hanging out with us today. Let our listeners know, where can they find you? Where can they find your book? Any other stuff that you want to let them know about?
You can find me on my website, which is yilingliu.com, and you can find me on my favorite social media platform, evidently Instagram. my handle is Instalingers.
Excellent. And congrats on the book. Can't wait for the Grindr sequel. Very excited to have
Thanks
you here
for having
today.
me.
We love hearing from all of you. We love continuing to build this community, and we just want to shout out some of our favorite things every episode.
Want to shout out Tressa, who sent us a video of, which I have seen circulating around, of a brother who basically recited the theme song to the L Word as the speech to
Oh my God, yes. Love it.
his sister's wedding, which I'm obsessed with. I'm also obsessed with some of the comments in there. So he was like, I took out some of the negative words for the thing, and someone's like, it's actually fighting, fucking, crying, drinking, whatever. He's like, I took all of those out. I'm like, I wonder if I can remember it. Fighting, fucking, crying, drinking, writing, winning, losing, kissing,
one of the screaming, isn't it? No,
Screaming.
Wait, now it's been so long. God, okay, it's clearly time for a rewatch. You're right, everyone. We will get on it.
kissing, dreaming is the last 2. I love it. And I think that's the ultimate ally, really.
Truly.
Mm-hmm.
As always, we want to thank our Lesbian Jesus patrons, Mark Foster,
Lizette Stye,
Adi Benitez,
Sophia Phillips,
and Armani Gucci.
And our King Princess patrons, Amy and Ellen.
And Andrea Doucette. Thank you all so much. We absolutely could not keep making this podcast without you and without the support of all of our patrons.
Remember, you can also find us on all the social medias, Instagram, Facebook, Blue Sky, and TikTok at Lez Hang Out Pod.
You can email us at lezhangoutpod@gmail.com.
Or check out our website at lezhangoutpod.com.
Whatever app you use to listen to podcasts, make sure that you subscribe. That way you'll get new episodes as soon as they go up.
We also post videos on our YouTube channel, so make sure you subscribe at youtube.com/lezhangoutpod to catch them.
Lez Hang Out is an independently produced show. It's hosted by us, with our audio production done by Ellie. Our production assistant is Krista Murison, and various other podcasting shenanigans are done by me.
If you want to support the podcast, the easiest way to do that is to rate and review us on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. We'd love to hear what you have to say.
If you want to support us financially, you can join our Patreon. It is one of the best ways to help us keep making this show. You get access to our Discord chat and our bonus Patreon Lez-tricurricular episodes. You can join that at bit.ly/LezPatreon.
If you want to get some Les merch, it is the perfect time because Pride Month is coming up. You can get that at bit.ly/LezMerch. Get your gay Lez Hangout Pride. Take pictures. We would love to see it on you at Pride.
Remember, we also have a queer production company making queer podcast musicals with guaranteed happy endings you can find everywhere at Dollar Bean Prod.
You can listen to our first 2 shows, The Flame and Journey to the Heart, on any podcasting app.
And if you want to help support us in making more musicals, you can join our Patreon at bit.ly/DollarBeanPatreon.
If you want to follow us individually, you can follow me at Ellie Brigida on Instagram and TikTok.
You can find me on Instagram, Blue Sky, and TikTok at LSH Foster.
With that, I'm Ellie.
And I'm Lee. And let's hang out again soon.
Let's hang out.
Hi, I'm Brandy Basanti. For the last 15 years, I've starred on one of the most successful reality shows of all time, Story Tours. On my new show, The Real Reality, my guest and I will reveal the real story of what it's like navigating fame and notoriety. Because it's my show, I can do whatever I want. I can say whatever I want. No filters, no rules, no network executives. And I believe that's what the world wants. Raw, real, authentic, and I'm gonna fucking give it to you. Though success is great, being in the public eye can come at a cost. Oftentimes, what you see on camera is not the real reality. On each episode of my show, we'll sit down with a different notable individual from the world of TV, film, sports, or internet fame. We will explore their unique story, what really happened on and off camera, how becoming famous has truly impacted their lives, and what their vision is for their future. In a world obsessed with celebrity, followers, and subscribers, the true story is often lost or even buried. This show will reveal what really happened. This show will reveal what people really felt. This show will reveal what fame is really like. This is The Real Reality. Subscribe now, wherever you get your podcasts.